Relatively higher triglycerides are associated with an increased coronary heart disease mortality risk. And that's what we can see here in this study of about 4.5 million people. On the y-axis, we've got the hazard ratio for CHD mortality, in other words, risk of death from heart disease, plotted against triglycerides, or TAG, on the x-axis. And when looking at the fully adjusted model, that's the data in green and the shaded green region, we can see that above a triglyceride level of about 75 milligrams per deciliter, that CHD mortality risk significantly increases as its shaded green region is completely above that hazard ratio of 1. So these data would suggest that triglycerides are bad for health. But all triglycerides are not the same for the potential impacts on health and even longevity. And that's because individual triglycerides are associated with an increased odds of living to 85 years. And that's what we'll see here. This is a study that looked at a plot of longevity versus all-cause mortality in about 12,000 people. On the y-axis, we've got the log of the odds ratio, OR, for longevity. In other words, odds of living to 85 years, plotted against the log of the hazard ratio for all-cause mortality. In other words, risk of death for all causes on the x-axis. And where we want to be on this plot is the upper left quadrant. And that's where there's the highest odds for reaching 85 years and the lowest risk for death from all causes, all-cause mortality risk. So there we can see that there are at least three triglyceride species that pop up in that upper left quadrant. C56-8, in other words, 56 carbons, 8 double bonds, triglyceride, TAG. 58 carbons, 11 double bonds, and 58 carbons, 7 double bonds, as shown there. And there are a few other red dots that are not shown, which are shown here. So there are 4 other triglyceride species. And then we can see how they relate to that odds of reaching 85 years in this table. So those 5 triglyceride species. And that's what's shown on the left, odds of reaching 85 years in the middle. Now here, we can see that the odds ratio is greater than 1 in each case. For example, for the C54-9 TAG, it's 1.11. But more importantly is the data in parentheses. That's the 95% confidence interval. And you can see that those values are completely above 1, which suggests a significant association. And when looking at the p-value and FDR for each of these 5 longevity-associated triglycerides, we can see that their p-value and FDR is less than 0.05. So these are significantly associated with an increased odds of reaching 85 years. So with that in mind, the goal is to keep these triglycerides relatively high. And the good news is that these triglycerides can be tracked and then potentially optimized. And the way I've been doing that is I'm using Iolo's at-home metabolomics kit, which includes 241 different triglyceride species, including 29 longevity-associated triglycerides that correspond to the 5 that are on this table. In addition, this kit also has data for 385 and more metabolites, which I've highlighted in many videos on this channel. And if you're interested in using it yourself, discount link in the video's description. All right, so what's my data? So all of that data for 7 tests is shown here. On the right, we've got those 5 longevity-associated triglycerides. And then note that on the left, there are a myriad of ways to form these triglycerides. In the first case, C54-9, there's only one metabolite in Iolo's kit that corresponds, so that's relatively easy. But when going to 56-6, you can see that there are a variety of different triglyceride combinations that form the 56-6 triglyceride species. For example, C22-4 in one case, C24 in another case, and then you've got 2 other groups of fatty acids, 34-2 and 36-2. So there are many different triglyceride combinations that can form a given triglyceride species, in this case 56-6. And we can see why that's the case by taking a quick look at triglyceride biochemistry, as shown here. So on the left, triglyceride has a glycerol backbone, and then there are 3 fatty acids that are connected, esterified to glycerol. In this case, each of the fatty acids are the same, and they include the C12 one double bond fatty acid. So to get the sum, we get a C36-3 triglyceride, as shown there. So each of these positions in the triglyceride can have different fatty acids, thereby leading to different combinations, and with these combinations forming specific triglyceride species. All right, so how am I tracking these data with the goal of keeping them relatively high? Well, I tested 5 times in 2023, And then for each test, I'm taking the sum of these 29 longevity-associated triglycerides that correspond to these 5 triglyceride species. So for the first test, for example, we can see that that sum was 17.5 micromolar. Now that's relatively low, and actually that's the lowest value that I had for their sum for any of the 5 tests in 2023. In contrast, for test number 3, I had 79 micromolar, which is my best to date for these 29 triglyceride species. So the goal is to keep these relatively high. Now, another way that I'm looking at it is by looking at year-to-year changes with the goal of avoiding any age-related decrease, or even a diet-induced change that can lead to a decrease in these specific triglycerides. So for 2022, when looking at the sum for those 5 different tests, my average value for these 29 triglyceride species is 42 micromolar. Now, for 2024, I currently have data for 2 tests. I just sent data on Monday corresponding to blood test number 3 in 2024 for analysis to IOLO, so that'll be test number 3. So after the first 2 tests, though, the average value for these 29 triglycerides is currently 47 micromolar. So 2024 is off to a relatively good start in avoiding any age-related decline and keeping these triglycerides, these specific triglycerides, relatively high. So then the question is, how can I keep these triglycerides relatively high? And for that, I calculate correlations with diet, and I won't go into it in this video, but they are currently on Patreon. So if you're interested in that, check it out. We've also got a whole bunch of discount links that you may be interested in, including discount links for at-home metabolomics, epigenetic testing, oral microbiome composition, NED quantification, at-home blood testing with SciFox Health, which includes ApoB, but also GrimAge, green tea, diet tracking with Chronometer, or if you'd like to support the channel, you can do that with the website Buy Me a Coffee. We've also got merch, so if you're interested in wearing the ConquerAging or Dietary brand, as I've got on here, that link and all of the other links will be in the video's description. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Have a great day.